Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she walked down the dusty firing range. The morning sun beat down on the military training facility, creating waves of heat that danced above the concrete. At 26, she had been working as a range safety officer for 3 years, but today felt different somehow. Maybe it was the new group of Navy SEALs who had arrived for advanced marksmanship training, or maybe it was just another Tuesday that would change everything. The shooting range stretched out before her like a long corridor of discipline and precision. Targets hung at various distances, some riddled with bullet holes from earlier sessions, others fresh and waiting for their turn. Sarah's job was simple enough: adjust the targets, ensure safety protocols, and keep the range running smoothly. She had done this thousands of times, but she never got tired of the controlled chaos that came with military training. As she bent down to adjust the mechanism that would move the targets to different distances, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of boots on gravel behind her. She glanced over her shoulder to see a tall figure approaching. The man wore the standard military fatigues, but something about his posture and the way he carried himself suggested he was not just any soldier. "Excuse me, ma'am," the voice was deep and respectful. Sarah turned around fully to face him. The man standing before her had dark hair cropped short in military fashion, intense green eyes, and a scar that ran along his left jaw. Despite his intimidating appearance, his expression was gentle, almost uncertain. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked, straightening up and brushing dirt from her hands. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison," he said, extending his hand. "My team is scheduled for range time starting at 0900 hours. Sarah checked her watch. It was 8:45. "You're a bit early, but that's fine. I'm Sarah Martinez, Range Safety Officer. I was just making some adjustments to the target systems." Jake nodded, but instead of walking away, he remained standing there. Sarah noticed his hands were trembling slightly, which seemed odd for someone who was obviously a seasoned military professional. Most SEALs she had encountered were the picture of calm confidence. "Is everything okay?" she asked, genuine concern creeping into her voice. Jake looked down at his hands, then back at her. "I have to be honest with you. I'm having some difficulties. It's been 6 months since I returned from deployment, and I'm having trouble with my shooting." Sarah had heard about this before. Post-traumatic stress could affect soldiers in many ways, and sometimes it manifested in their ability to perform tasks they had once done automatically. She had seen tough Marines break down on the range, and Navy SEALs struggle with weapons they had handled expertly for years. "What kind of difficulties?" she asked softly. "My hands shake when I try to aim," Jake admitted. "It started after an incident overseas. My spotter was killed right next to me, and ever since then, every time I pick up a rifle, I see his face. I hear the sound of the bullet that took him down." Sarah felt her heart tighten. In her 3 years on the range, she had developed a reputation for being professional but caring. Soldiers often opened up to her because she listened without judgment and offered practical help rather than empty sympathy. "Have you talked to anyone about this?" she asked. "The Navy psychologist, yes. But he doesn't understand what it's like out there. He keeps talking about breathing exercises and visualization techniques, but none of that helps when you're holding a weapon that feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. She had noticed that many soldiers struggled not just with the psychological aspects of their trauma, but with the practical realities of retraining their bodies to do what they had once done instinctively. "What was your specialty?" she asked. "Sniper," Jake replied. "I was considered one of the best in my unit. I could hit targets at distances that most people couldn't even see clearly. But now..." He trailed off, looking out at the targets in the distance. "Now you're afraid you've lost that ability," Sarah finished for him. "I'm afraid I'll let my team down. These guys depend on me to provide cover fire, to eliminate threats before they can harm anyone. If I can't do that..." Jake's voice cracked slightly. Sarah had heard similar stories before, but something about Jake's situation touched her deeply. Maybe it was the vulnerability he was showing, or maybe it was the way he seemed to be carrying the weight of his entire team's safety on his shoulders. "You know," she said, "I've been working with soldiers who have similar challenges. Not officially, of course. But I've noticed some techniques that seem to help." Jake looked at her with interest. "What kind of techniques?" "Well, first we need to understand that your body is trying to protect you. When you hold that rifle, your brain remembers the danger associated with it. The shaking is actually your nervous system trying to keep you alert and ready to respond to threats. But there are no threats here, Jake pointed out. Your conscious mind knows that, but your subconscious doesn't. It's still stuck in that moment when your spotter was killed. We need to help your body relearn that holding a rifle can be safe again. Jake listened intently as Sarah explained her observations about how trauma affected motor skills and muscle memory. She had developed these insights through her own research and countless hours observing soldiers on the range. The first step, she continued, is to acknowledge what you're feeling instead of fighting it. When you try to force your hands to stop shaking, you actually make it worse because you're adding stress to an already stressed system. So what do I do instead? We start small. Today, don't even worry about shooting. Just hold the rifle and let yourself feel whatever comes up. Don't judge it, don't fight it, just notice it. Jake looked skeptical. That seems too simple. Simple doesn't mean easy, Sarah replied. It takes a lot of courage to face those feelings instead of pushing them away. At that moment, the rest of Jake's team arrived. Sarah could see 4 other men approaching, all carrying their gear and moving with the coordinated efficiency that marked them as elite soldiers. Jake's posture immediately changed, becoming more rigid and controlled. "Morrison, you ready for this?" one of the men called out. Sarah could see the genuine affection and concern in his voice. "Ready as I'll ever be, Peterson," Jake replied, but Sarah heard the tension underneath his casual tone. The team leader, a stocky man with graying hair, approached them. "I'm Chief Petty Officer David Chen," he said to Sarah. "My boys are here for advanced marksmanship training. I'm Sarah Martinez, your range safety officer. I'll be working with you today to ensure everything runs smoothly." Chief Chen nodded approvingly. "Morrison here is our best shooter. Or was, before." He caught himself and glanced at Jake apologetically. "Before I forgot how to hold a rifle without my hands shaking like a leaf," Jake finished bitterly. "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Chen said firmly. "You're going through a tough time, but that doesn't change who you are or what you're capable of." Sarah watched the interaction with interest. It was clear that Jake's teammates cared about him and were trying to be supportive, but their very presence seemed to add to the pressure he was putting on himself. "Why don't we start with some basic range safety briefings?" Sarah suggested. "It'll give everyone a chance to get comfortable with the environment." As she led the team through the standard safety procedures, Sarah kept an eye on Jake. She noticed that he paid attention to every detail, but his hands continued to tremble whenever he looked at the rifles laid out on the shooting bench. "The most important thing to remember," Sarah was saying, "is that every weapon is loaded until proven otherwise. Even when you know it's not, you treat it as if it is." She picked up one of the rifles and demonstrated the proper way to check if it was clear. As she handled the weapon with easy confidence, she saw Jake watching her intently. "The key to safe weapon handling," she continued, "is developing muscle memory through repetition. Your body learns to go through the safety checks automatically, which frees your mind to focus on other things." After the safety briefing, Chief Chen organized his team for their first shooting exercise. The plan was simple: each man would fire 10 rounds at targets set at 200 yards to establish baseline accuracy. "Morrison, you're up first," Chen announced. Sarah saw Jake's face pale slightly, but he nodded and walked to the firing line. She positioned herself behind him, as was standard protocol for range safety officers. Jake picked up his rifle and immediately she could see his hands beginning to shake. He tried to control it, taking deep breaths and adjusting his grip, but the trembling only got worse. "Take your time," Sarah said quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. Jake nodded and tried to sight his target. Through her spotting scope, Sarah could see the rifle barrel wavering significantly. There was no way he would be able to make an accurate shot like this. After what seemed like several minutes, Jake lowered the rifle. "I can't do it," he said, loud enough for his team to hear. The other SEALs exchanged glances. Sarah could see the concern and frustration on their faces, not with Jake, but with the situation. "Maybe we should try a different approach," Chief Chen suggested diplomatically. "No," Jake said firmly. "I need to figure this out. My team is depending on me." Sarah made a decision that would change everything. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison," she said, "may I suggest something?" Jake turned to her, desperation clear in his eyes. "At this point, I'm willing to try anything." "Put the rifle down for a moment," she said. Jake complied, setting the weapon on the shooting bench. Now, tell me about your spotter. What was his name? Jake looked surprised by the question. Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez. Why? What was he like? He was the best partner I could have asked for. Funny, smart, completely reliable. He had a gift for reading wind conditions and could calculate range adjustments faster than most people could work a calculator. As Jake talked about Rodriguez, Sarah noticed that his voice became stronger and his posture more relaxed. His hands stopped shaking. He sounds like an exceptional soldier, she said. He was. He saved my life more times than I can count. And I couldn't save his. There it was, the core of Jake's trauma. Survivor's guilt combined with a sense of failure was creating a psychological block that his body was expressing through the trembling. Lieutenant Commander, Sarah said gently, what do you think Sergeant Rodriguez would say if he could see you right now? Jake was quiet for a long moment. He'd probably tell me to stop being such a drama queen and get back to work. Sarah smiled. He sounds like he had a good sense of humor. The best. He could make us laugh even in the worst situations. I think, Sarah said carefully, that honoring his memory means continuing to do the job he helped train you to do. Not perfectly, not without difficulty, but with the same dedication and professionalism he would expect. Jake picked up the rifle again. This time, his hands were steadier, though not completely steady. Don't worry about the target, Sarah advised. Just focus on your breathing and remember what Rodriguez taught you. Jake nodded and shouldered the rifle. Sarah could see him trying to apply the relaxation techniques she had suggested earlier. His breathing became deeper and more regular. Whenever you're ready, she said softly. Jake took aim. The rifle barrel still wavered, but less than before. After a moment, he squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out across the range. Through her spotting scope, Sarah could see that the bullet had hit the target, though not in the center ring. Not bad, she announced. You're on the target. Jake lowered the rifle and looked at her with surprise. I actually hit it? You actually hit it. The grouping isn't what you're used to, I'm sure, but it's a solid hit. For the first time since she had met him, Sarah saw Jake smile genuinely. Can I try again? He asked. Take as many shots as you need, Sarah replied. As Jake continued shooting, Sarah noticed that each shot was slightly better than the last. His confidence was returning gradually, and, with it, his technical skill. After he had fired 10 rounds, Chief Chen approached the firing line. How did he do? He asked Sarah. See for yourself, she replied, handing him the spotting scope. Chen looked through the scope at Jake's target. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Morrison, you might not be back to your old standards yet, but you're definitely hitting what you're aiming at. Jake's teammates gathered around to congratulate him. Sarah could see the relief and genuine happiness on their faces. It was clear that Jake's struggle had been weighing on all of them. What did you do differently? Asked Peterson, one of the other snipers. I stopped fighting against what I was feeling, Jake replied, glancing at Sarah. And I remembered that I'm not out there alone. As the training session continued, Sarah worked with each member of the team. But she kept coming back to Jake, offering small adjustments and encouragement. She noticed that he was becoming more comfortable with each round fired. During a break between exercises, Jake approached her privately. I wanted to thank you, he said. I've been struggling with this for months, and no one else seemed to understand what I was going through. I think you understood it all along, Sarah replied. You just needed someone to remind you that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. The Navy therapist never talked about Rodriguez, Jake said. He kept trying to get me to forget about what happened, to move past it. But you made me realize that forgetting isn't the answer. Trauma isn't something you get over, Sarah explained. It's something you learn to carry. The goal isn't to pretend it didn't happen, but to find a way to honor what you've been through while still moving forward. Jake nodded thoughtfully. You seem to know a lot about this. Have you been through something similar? Sarah was quiet for a moment. My brother was a Marine. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan before he was killed by an IED. I started working here because I wanted to find a way to honor his service while helping other soldiers. I'm sorry, Jake said sincerely. Thank you. Working here has taught me that everyone carries their losses differently, but no one should have to carry them alone." As the day progressed, Jake's shooting continued to improve. He still wasn't back to his previous level of precision, but he was hitting targets consistently and his hands had stopped shaking entirely. During the final exercise of the day, Sarah watched as Jake took aim at a target placed at 400 yards. This was considered a challenging shot even for experienced marksmen. Jake settled into his shooting position with the careful deliberation she had come to expect from him. He controlled his breathing, adjusted his sight picture, and squeezed the trigger smoothly. The shot was perfect. Sarah looked through her spotting scope and saw the bullet hole dead center in the target. "Bullseye," she announced. Jake's team erupted in cheers. Chieftain slapped him on the back and Peterson whistled in appreciation. "Now that's the Morrison we know and love," Chen said proudly. As the team began packing up their gear, Jake lingered on the firing line with Sarah. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever." "You never lost it," Sarah replied. "You just needed to find a different way to access it." "Will you be here tomorrow?" Jake asked. "We have another training session scheduled." "I'll be here," Sarah confirmed. As Jake walked away to join his team, Sarah began the process of shutting down the range for the day. She felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond her normal job duties. Something significant had happened today, not just for Jake, but for her as well. She had always known that her work on the range was important, but today she had seen firsthand how much difference the right support could make in a soldier's life. Jake had reminded her why she had chosen this job in the first place. As she locked up the equipment and prepared to leave, Sarah reflected on the day's events. She had witnessed a broken warrior begin to heal, and, in the process, she had discovered something new about herself as well. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new soldiers, and new opportunities to make a difference. For the first time in months, Sarah found herself genuinely looking forward to it. The sun was setting over the military base as Sarah walked to her car. Behind her, the empty firing range waited quietly for another day of training, another opportunity for soldiers to face their fears and overcome their limitations. In her pocket, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She pulled it out and saw that it was from an unknown number. "Thank you for today. You made me remember why I became a SEAL in the first place. Looking forward to tomorrow's session." Sarah smiled as she got into her car. Sometimes the most important work happened not when everything was going perfectly, but when someone was brave enough to ask for help and someone else was willing to provide it. As she drove home through the gathering dusk, Sarah thought about her brother and how proud he would be of the work she was doing. She was honoring his memory by helping other soldiers find their way through the darkness of trauma and back to the light of purpose and skill. Tomorrow would be another day on the range, another chance to make a difference in the lives of the men and women who served their country. And, for the first time in a long while, Sarah couldn't wait to see what would happen next. The next morning arrived with an unexpected chill in the air. Sarah arrived at the range 30 minutes early, as was her habit, but found herself moving with more energy than usual. The events of the previous day had stayed with her through the night, filling her dreams with images of soldiers finding their strength again and weapons that became tools of healing rather than reminders of loss. As she unlocked the range facility and began her morning preparations, Sarah found herself thinking about Jake Morrison. His text message the evening before had been brief but heartfelt, and she wondered how he was feeling about returning to the range for his second day of training. The morning air was crisp and clear, perfect conditions for precision shooting. Sarah moved efficiently through her checklist, checking target mechanisms, verifying safety equipment, and ensuring that all range protocols were properly in place. But her mind kept drifting to the conversation she'd had with Jake about his fallen spotter, Tommy Rodriguez. At 8:30, she heard the familiar sound of military vehicles approaching the range. Looking up from the equipment she was organizing, Sarah saw the same team of SEALs arriving for their second day of training. Jake was among them, but, from a distance, she couldn't read his expression or gauge his state of mind. Chief Petty Officer Chen was the first to approach the range facility. "Morning, Sarah," he called out with genuine warmth. "My boys are talking about nothing but yesterday's session. Whatever you did with Morrison, it worked." "He did all the hard work himself," Sarah replied. "I just reminded him of what he already knew." "Well, whatever it was, he slept better last night than he has in months," Chen continued. Peterson was his roommate on deployment, and he says Jake hasn't had nightmares for the past 2 nights. That's the longest stretch without them since they got back. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at this news. She had hoped that Jake's breakthrough on the range might have broader effects, but she hadn't dared to expect results so quickly. Jake approached them, carrying his equipment with more confidence than she had seen the day before. His posture was straighter, his movements more decisive, and, when he made eye contact with her, Sarah saw something that had been missing yesterday: hope. "Good morning, Sarah," he said, and she noticed that his voice was stronger, more certain. "Good morning, Lieutenant Commander. How are you feeling about today's session?" Nervous, he admitted honestly, but also excited. "I spent some time last night thinking about what you said regarding Rodriguez, and I think I understand something now that I didn't before." "What's that?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "The best way to honor his memory isn't to pretend that losing him didn't affect me. It's to acknowledge that it did affect me, but then, to choose to keep going anyway. Rodriguez wouldn't want me to quit because of what happened to him. He'd want me to keep doing the job we trained to do." Sarah nodded approvingly. "That sounds like wisdom to me." "I also realized something else," Jake continued. "I've been so focused on the guilt and the loss that I forgot about all the things Rodriguez taught me. He wasn't just my spotter, he was my friend and my mentor. I carry his knowledge with me every time I pick up a rifle." Chief Chen had been listening to this conversation with obvious satisfaction. "That's good thinking, Morrison. Rodriguez was one of the best instructors I ever worked with. His techniques and insights didn't die with him, they live on in every sniper he trained." As the rest of the team finished preparing their equipment, Sarah outlined the day's training plan. Today would be more challenging than the previous day, with longer range targets and more complex shooting scenarios. "We'll start with static targets at 500 yards, she explained, then move to moving targets at various ranges. The final exercise will be precision shots at 700 yards in simulated field conditions." Peterson whistled appreciatively. 700 yards? That's serious long-range work. "Rodriguez and I used to practice at that distance every week," Jake said quietly. "He had this way of reading wind patterns that was almost supernatural." "Tell us about his techniques," Sarah suggested. "Maybe sharing that knowledge will help the whole team." Jake looked surprised by the suggestion, but, after a moment's consideration, he nodded. Rodriguez always said that shooting long range was like having a conversation with the environment. You don't just aim at a target, you read the air, the light, the ground conditions, and then you make your shot based on all of that information. As Jake began explaining Rodriguez's methods, Sarah watched his transformation continue. His voice became animated and confident as he shared technical details and personal anecdotes about his fallen partner. She could see that talking about Rodriguez in this positive, constructive way was healing for him. The other team members listened intently, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. It became clear that Rodriguez's expertise had been legendary among SEALs, and Jake was one of the few people who had learned directly from him. "He used to say that every shot tells a story," Jake continued. "The bullet's path through the air, the way it hits the target, even a miss, they all contain information that can make you a better shooter if you know how to read them." When it came time for the actual shooting exercises, Jake volunteered to go first. Sarah watched as he approached the firing line with steady hands and calm breathing. The transformation from the previous day was remarkable. Jake settled into his shooting position with practiced efficiency. Sarah could see him going through Rodriguez's mental checklist, checking wind indicators, assessing light conditions, calculating distance and elevation adjustments. When he was ready, his movements were smooth and controlled. The first shot at 500 yards was a direct hit, slightly off-center but well within acceptable parameters. The second shot was better, closer to the bullseye. By the fifth shot, Jake was grouping his rounds in a pattern that would have been impressive for any marksman. "Outstanding shooting," Sarah announced as she checked his target through the spotting scope. "You're back in fine form, Lieutenant Commander." Jake's teammates cheered and congratulated him, but Sarah noticed that his reaction was more subdued than she might have expected. When she asked him about it during a break, he explained his thinking. "I'm grateful to be shooting well again," he said, "but I'm also realizing that this is just the beginning. Getting my technical skills back is important, but the real challenge is going to be applying those skills in the field where lives depend on my accuracy." Sarah appreciated his thoughtful approach. Many soldiers made the mistake of assuming that success on the training range automatically translated to success in combat situations. Jake's awareness of the difference showed maturity and wisdom. "What do you think will be the biggest challenge when you're deployed again?" she asked. "Trust," Jake replied immediately. "Trusting myself to make the right decisions under pressure. Yesterday, you helped me remember how to shoot. But I still need to learn how to trust that I won't let my team down when it really matters." This conversation led Sarah to suggest a modification to the day's training plan. Instead of moving directly to the longer range targets, she proposed adding stress-inducing elements to the exercises to better simulate field conditions. "What kind of stress?" Chief Chen asked. "Time pressure, multiple targets, decision-making scenarios," Sarah explained. "Things that require not just technical skill, but also judgment and confidence under pressure." The team agreed enthusiastically to this modification. Sarah set up a series of targets at varying distances and gave Jake a scenario to work with. "You're providing overwatch for a patrol that's moving through hostile territory," she told him. "You have 3 potential targets at different ranges, but you can only engage one of them before the others will be alerted to your position. You have 30 seconds to assess the situation and take your shot." Jake nodded and took his position. Sarah could see him thinking through the scenario, weighing the tactical considerations just as he would in the field. After 20 seconds of careful assessment, he chose his target and made a clean, precise shot. "Excellent decision-making," Chief Chen commented. "You chose the target that posed the greatest threat to the patrol." As the exercises continued, Sarah noticed that Jake's confidence was building steadily. More importantly, she could see that he was beginning to trust his own judgment again. The technical skills had returned quickly, but the psychological confidence was taking longer to rebuild. During the lunch break, Jake sought out Sarah for a private conversation. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "How do you deal with the responsibility of working with soldiers who are struggling? Don't you worry about saying or doing the wrong thing?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think about my brother a lot," she said finally. "I think about what kind of support he would have wanted if he had come home with injuries, physical or psychological. And I try to provide that kind of support to the soldiers I work with." "But doesn't it scare you? The idea that someone's ability to do their job might depend on your help?" "It would scare me if I thought I was the one responsible for fixing them," Sarah replied. "But I've learned that I can't fix anyone. What I can do is create an environment where they feel safe to heal themselves." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. I think I've been putting too much pressure on myself to get back to where I was before, instead of accepting that I might be different now, but still capable." "Different doesn't mean broken," Sarah agreed. "Some of the best soldiers I've worked with are the ones who've been through difficult experiences and came out stronger because of what they learned about themselves." The afternoon session focused on moving targets and long-range precision work. Sarah had set up a complex course that required shooters to engage multiple targets at different distances while changing positions between shots. Jake's performance throughout these exercises was impressive. His accuracy was consistently high, and his decision-making under pressure showed the kind of tactical intelligence that had made him an elite sniper before his trauma. But it was during the final exercise of the day that something truly significant happened. Sarah had set up a particularly challenging scenario, a single target at 700 yards, with difficult wind conditions and a time constraint. As Jake prepared for the shot, a small aircraft passed overhead, creating additional noise and visual distraction. For a moment, Sarah saw Jake's old anxiety return. His hands began to tremble slightly, and she could see tension building in his shoulders. It was exactly the kind of unexpected distraction that might trigger memories of the incident where Rodriguez was killed. Instead of rushing to help him or offering advice, Sarah decided to trust Jake to handle the situation himself. She watched as he closed his eyes for a moment, took several deep breaths, and then opened them with renewed focus. "Rodriguez always said that distractions were just information," Jake said quietly, as much to himself as to anyone else. "They tell you something about the environment that you need to factor into your shot." He settled back into his shooting position, made a small adjustment to account for the aircraft's effect on wind patterns, and took his shot. The bullet hit dead center of the target. The entire team erupted in cheers, but Sarah noticed that Jake's reaction was calm and measured. He had made an exceptional shot under difficult conditions, but, more importantly, he had managed his psychological response to an unexpected stressor. "How did you do that?" Peterson asked. "That was one of the best shots I've ever seen under those conditions." "I remembered something Rodriguez taught me," Jake replied. "He used to say that the difference between a good sniper and a great sniper isn't technical skill, it's the ability to stay calm and think clearly when everything is going wrong." As the team packed up their equipment for the day, Chief Chen approached Sarah privately. "I don't know what kind of magic you're working with Morrison," he said, "but I haven't seen him shoot like that since before the incident. More importantly, I haven't seen him this mentally sharp in months." "He's doing all the work," Sarah replied. "I'm just providing a safe space for him to rediscover what he already knew." "Well, whatever it is, the whole team is benefiting. Morrison's confidence is affecting everyone's performance." As the SEALs prepared to leave, Jake hung back to speak with Sarah. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "This morning, I woke up and, for the first time in months, I didn't immediately think about the day Rodriguez died. Instead, I thought about all the things he taught me and how I could use them to be a better soldier and teammate." Sarah smiled. "That sounds like real progress." "It is. And I owe that to you. You helped me understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means learning to carry difficult experiences in a way that makes you stronger instead of weaker." "You would have figured that out eventually," Sarah said. "You have the same strength and intelligence that made you an elite SEAL in the first place. You just needed to be reminded that those qualities didn't disappear because of what you went through." As Jake walked away to join his team, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had witnessed something remarkable over the past 2 days, the healing of a wounded warrior and the restoration of his faith in himself. But she also sensed that their story was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and the real test would come when Jake had to apply what he was learning in actual field conditions. As she secured the range for the night, Sarah reflected on the lessons she had learned as well. Working with Jake had reminded her that sometimes the most important help you can give someone is not advice or instruction, but simply the space to rediscover their own strength. The evening air was cool and peaceful as Sarah locked up the facility. In the distance, she could see the lights of the military base, where thousands of men and women were preparing for another day of service to their country. Tomorrow would bring another opportunity to make a difference in their lives. And, for the first time in months, Sarah felt truly excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison's breakthrough on the firing range, and the rhythm of training had settled into something that felt almost natural. Sarah had watched Jake's confidence continue to grow with each passing day, but she had also begun to notice something else developing between them, a connection that went beyond the professional relationship of instructor and student. It started small. Jake would arrive at the range a few minutes early to help Sarah set up equipment. He would linger after training sessions to discuss not just shooting techniques, but broader topics like military life, family, and the challenges of transitioning between deployment and home. Sarah found herself looking forward to these conversations as much as the formal training sessions. On this particular morning, Sarah was adjusting the target mechanisms when she heard Jake's familiar footsteps approaching earlier than usual. She looked up to see him carrying 2 cups of coffee, a gesture that had become their informal routine over the past week. "Good morning," he said, offering her one of the cups. "I thought you might need this. Chief Chen has some interesting plans for today's training." "Oh?" Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. The morning was cooler than usual, with a light mist hanging over the range that would make for challenging shooting conditions. "He wants to run a full mission simulation," Jake explained. "Multiple targets, changing conditions, team coordination, the works. He says it's time to see if all this training has prepared us for the real thing." Sarah noticed a slight tension in Jake's voice. Over the past few weeks, she had learned to read the subtle signs of his anxiety. He had made tremendous progress, but the prospect of a full simulation was clearly bringing back some of his old concerns. "How are you feeling about that?" she asked. Jake was quiet for a moment, sipping his coffee and looking out at the targets shrouded in morning mist. "Honestly? Nervous. But also excited. I feel more like myself than I have in months, and I think I'm ready for this kind of challenge." "But?" Sarah prompted, sensing there was more. "But what if I'm wrong? What if when the pressure really builds, I fall apart again? My team is counting on me, and I don't know if I can handle letting them down twice." Sarah set down her coffee and turned to face him fully. Over the weeks of working together, she had come to understand that Jake's perfectionism was both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. His commitment to excellence had made him an elite sniper, but his fear of failure was now threatening to undermine his recovery. "Jake," she said gently, "can I tell you something I've learned from watching soldiers train here?" He nodded, giving her his full attention. The ones who never fail are usually the ones who never push themselves hard enough to grow. The soldiers I respect most are the ones who are willing to risk failure because they know that's how you discover what you're truly capable of. But what if I fail and people get hurt because of it? Then, you'll learn from it and do better next time. But what if you don't try and people get hurt because you weren't there to help them? Jake considered this as they finished setting up the range equipment. Sarah could see him wrestling with the familiar tension between fear and duty that she had observed in many combat veterans. When Chief Chen and the rest of the team arrived, the atmosphere was noticeably different from previous training days. There was an intensity and focus that suggested everyone understood the importance of this session. "All right, people," Chen announced, "today we're going to run a full tactical simulation. Morrison, you'll be providing overwatch while the rest of the team executes a building clearance scenario. You'll have multiple potential targets, limited ammunition, and changing conditions throughout the exercise." Sarah watched Jake's face as Chen outlined the scenario. She could see him processing the tactical details and running through potential challenges in his mind. His hands were steady, but she noticed the way he kept checking and rechecking his equipment, a nervous habit she had observed during their first training session. "The key to this exercise," Chen continued, "is communication and adaptability. Conditions will change, priorities will shift, and everyone will need to trust their training and their teammates." As the team moved into position, Sarah took her place as range safety officer and observer. From her vantage point, she could see the entire training area and monitor Jake's position as well as the movement of the other team members. The simulation began with Jake establishing his overwatch position at a distance of 600 yards from the target building. Through her spotting scope, Sarah could see him setting up his rifle with the methodical precision she had come to expect from him. "Overwatch in position," Jake reported through his radio. His voice was calm and professional, showing no signs of the anxiety she knew he was feeling. "Copy, Overwatch. Team is moving to initial position," came Peterson's response. For the first 15 minutes of the exercise, everything proceeded smoothly. Jake provided clear, accurate reports on potential threats, and the ground team moved efficiently through their objectives. Sarah found herself feeling proud of Jake's performance and hopeful about his continued progress. Then, everything changed. A mechanical failure in one of the target mechanisms created an unexpected noise that echoed across the range. Simultaneously, the morning mist began to thicken, reducing visibility significantly. Most challenging of all, the exercise controllers introduced a surprise element: additional targets that required immediate engagement to protect the ground team. Sarah watched through her scope as Jake assessed the rapidly changing situation. She could see him identifying priority targets, calculating ranges and wind adjustments, and coordinating with his teammates through radio communications. But she could also see the slight tremor returning to his hands as the stress level increased. "Overwatch, we need immediate suppression of target building, second floor, east window," came an urgent radio call from the ground team. Jake acquired the target and prepared to engage. Through her spotting scope, Sarah could see that it was a challenging shot, long range, poor visibility, and time pressure all working against him. This was exactly the kind of situation that had caused his breakdown months earlier. For a moment, Jake hesitated. Sarah could see him struggling with doubt and fear. His rifle barrel wavered slightly as his old anxiety threatened to overwhelm his newfound confidence. Then, something remarkable happened. Instead of fighting against his fear or trying to push through it, Jake did something Sarah had taught him weeks earlier: he acknowledged what he was feeling and chose to act anyway. "I see you, Rodriguez," she heard him whisper to himself. "Help me make this shot count." Jake's hands steadied, his breathing regulated, and he took the shot. The bullet struck the target precisely where it needed to, eliminating the threat to his teammates. "Target neutralized," Jake reported calmly. "Ground team, you're clear to advance." The exercise continued for another 30 minutes, with Jake successfully engaging multiple targets under increasingly difficult conditions. When it finally concluded, Chief Chen's assessment was unequivocal. "Outstanding performance from everyone," he announced. Morrison, that was some of the finest precision shooting I've seen in 20 years of military service. But Jake's reaction surprised everyone. Instead of celebrating his success, he sat quietly for several minutes, processing what had just happened. When Sarah approached him, she found him staring out at the targets with a thoughtful expression. "You did incredibly well today," she told him. "I know," Jake replied. "And that's what's amazing to me. 6 months ago, I couldn't hold a rifle without my hands shaking. Today, I made shots under pressure that would have been challenging even before my trauma. What do you think made the difference?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I think the difference is that I stopped trying to be the person I was before Rodriguez died, and started learning to be the person I am now, someone who has been through loss and pain, but who chooses to keep serving anyway." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. This was more than just recovery from trauma, this was growth, transformation, and wisdom earned through suffering. "There's something else," Jake continued. "I couldn't have done this without you. Not just the technical training, but the way you helped me understand that healing doesn't mean going back to who you were before. It means becoming someone new, someone stronger." The sincerity in his voice touched Sarah deeply. Over the weeks of working together, she had come to care about Jake's progress in ways that went beyond her professional responsibilities. Watching him overcome his trauma and rediscover his strength had been one of the most rewarding experiences of her career. "You did all the hard work," she replied. "I just provided a safe space for you to figure things out. It was more than that, and you know it. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. You helped me understand that what I was going through wasn't weakness, it was a normal response to an abnormal situation." As the team packed up their equipment, Jake made a decision that would change both of their lives. "Sarah," he said, "I have something I need to tell you, and I hope you'll hear me out." She looked at him with curiosity and a hint of concern. "Over these past few weeks, working with you has meant more to me than just recovering my shooting skills. You've helped me remember who I am and what I'm capable of. But, more than that, you've become someone I care about deeply." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She had sensed that their connection was growing beyond the professional, but she hadn't expected Jake to address it so directly. "I know this complicates things," he continued. "I know there are regulations about relationships between instructors and students, and I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position." "Jake," Sarah began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish, please. In 2 weeks, our training rotation ends and my team will be rotating back to active duty. I know this might not be the right time or the right situation, but I had to tell you how I feel. You've been more than an instructor to me, you've been a friend, a guide, and someone I've come to care about more than I probably should." Sarah felt a rush of emotions, surprise, happiness, concern, and something that felt very much like love. Over the weeks of working with Jake, she had tried to maintain professional boundaries, but she couldn't deny that her feelings had grown beyond what was strictly appropriate for an instructor. "I care about you too," she admitted. "More than I probably should, given our professional relationship." Jake's face lit up with hope and relief. "But," Sarah continued, "we both know how complicated this is. You're still technically my student, and there are regulations about these kinds of relationships in military settings." "I know," Jake said. "And I respect that completely. I'm not asking you to do anything that would jeopardize your position or your career. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that when our professional relationship ends, maybe we could explore something personal." Sarah looked at this man who had come so far in such a short time. Jake Morrison had arrived at her range broken and doubting himself. Through hard work, courage, and determination, he had not only recovered his skills but had become stronger than he had been before his trauma. More than that, he had become someone she deeply admired and cared for. His vulnerability, his dedication to his team, his willingness to face his fears and grow from them, all of these qualities had drawn her to him in ways she hadn't expected. "When does your training rotation officially end?" she asked. 14 days from today," Jake replied. "And then, what happens?" "Then, my team gets 2 weeks of leave before we deploy again. I was hoping maybe we could spend some of that time together. Away from the range, away from the military structure, just as two people getting to know each other." Sarah felt a smile spreading across her face despite her efforts to remain professional. "I think I would like that very much," she said. The joy in Jake's expression was unmistakable. For a moment, they stood there looking at each other, both understanding that something important had shifted between them. But, until then, Sarah continued, we need to maintain our professional boundaries. I won't compromise your training or my position, no matter how I feel about you personally. Absolutely, Jake agreed. I wouldn't ask you to do anything else. As they walked back toward the main facility, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since the first day when Jake had approached her with trembling hands and shattered confidence. Not only had he recovered from his trauma, but he had become the kind of person she could envision building a future with. The next 2 weeks would test both of their abilities to maintain professional boundaries while acknowledging personal feelings. But, for the first time in months, Sarah found herself looking forward to the future with excitement rather than simple professional satisfaction. That evening, as she drove home from the base, Sarah thought about her brother and what he would think about Jake. She had a feeling he would approve of this strong, courageous man who had faced his demons and emerged victorious. More importantly, she had a feeling that Jake was exactly the kind of person who would honor the memory of those who had fallen by living his life with purpose and dedication. The road ahead was uncertain, but, for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood at the same firing range where she had first met Jake Morrison, but everything felt different. The morning air carried the promise of change, and, as she performed her final equipment checks before Jake's team completed their training rotation, she found herself fighting a mixture of excitement and nervousness that had nothing to do with work. Today marked the end of Jake's formal training period, which meant tomorrow would be the first day they could explore their relationship without the constraints of military protocol. The anticipation had been building for 14 days, making every professional interaction charged with unspoken possibilities. Jake arrived earlier than usual, as had become his habit. He carried the familiar 2 cups of coffee, but today his smile held something different, a warmth and intimacy that they had both been careful to keep hidden during the final weeks of training. Last day, he said, offering her the coffee with hands that were now completely steady. Last day, Sarah agreed, accepting the cup and allowing their fingers to brush in a way that would have been inappropriate just 24 hours earlier. The physical contact, small as it was, sent a jolt of electricity through both of them. After weeks of maintaining careful professional distance, the simple touch felt revolutionary. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Sarah asked, referring not to his deployment preparation but to their planned dinner date, their first official interaction as 2 people exploring a romantic relationship rather than instructor and student. Terrified, Jake admitted with a laugh. It's funny, I can make precision shots under enemy fire, but the thought of taking you to dinner has me more nervous than I've been in months. That's sweet, Sarah said, and meant it. There was something endearing about seeing this highly trained warrior admit to anxiety about something as simple as a date. As the rest of Jake's team arrived for their final training session, Sarah noticed a different dynamic among the men. Over the past month, Jake's recovery had positively affected the entire unit's morale and performance. Chief Chin had mentioned to her privately that the team's combat readiness scores were the highest they had been since before their last deployment. All right, people, Chief Chin announced, today's session is a full evaluation of everything we've learned over the past month. Morrison, you'll be running lead on the tactical planning. Sarah watched with pride as Jake stepped into the leadership role. The transformation from the broken, uncertain man she had met a month ago was complete. He moved with confidence, spoke with authority, and commanded the respect of his teammates through competence rather than rank alone. The morning's exercises were designed to test every aspect of their training. Complex shooting scenarios, rapid target acquisition, team coordination under pressure, everything that would be required of them in actual combat situations. Sarah observed from her safety position, but found herself focusing more on Jake's leadership and decision-making than on the technical aspects of marksmanship. During one particularly challenging scenario, an equipment malfunction created exactly the kind of unexpected stress that had originally triggered Jake's trauma. Sarah watched carefully as he processed the situation, made rapid adjustments to his plan, and continued executing his mission without hesitation. It was in that moment that Sarah fully understood how complete Jake's recovery had been. He wasn't just performing well despite his past trauma, he was performing better because of the wisdom and resilience he had gained through overcoming it. Outstanding performance, Chief Chin announced at the conclusion of the morning exercises. Morrison, your leadership today was exactly what I expect from a senior NCO. You've not only recovered your individual skills, but you've elevated the performance of the entire team. Jake accepted the praise with gracious professionalism, but Sarah could see the deep satisfaction in his eyes. This was more than just completing training, this was proof that he had truly healed and grown stronger. During the lunch break, Jake and Sarah found themselves alone for the first time in weeks. They walked to a quiet area overlooking the range, ostensibly to discuss the afternoon's training schedule, but really just to have a few minutes together without the constant presence of the team. "I have something for you," Jake said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small wrapped package. "Jake, you didn't need to get me anything," Sarah protested, though she was touched by the gesture. "I wanted to open it." Inside the wrapping was a small silver pendant in the shape of a target with a perfect bullseye in the center. It was simple but elegant, clearly chosen with care. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I wanted you to have something that would remind you of what you helped me accomplish here," Jake explained. "But also something that represents accuracy and precision, qualities I see in you every day." As he fastened the necklace around her neck, his hands gentle on her skin, Sarah felt a deep sense of rightness about what was developing between them. This wasn't just attraction or gratitude, this was something real and substantial, built on mutual respect and genuine care. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll treasure it." The afternoon session was the final test of Jake's progression. Chief Chen had designed a scenario that replicated as closely as possible the conditions under which Jake had lost his spotter months earlier. It was a deliberate challenge, designed to verify that his recovery was complete and permanent. Sarah watched with tension as Jake took his position. She knew this test was necessary, but she also knew how difficult it would be for him to face a scenario so similar to his original trauma. The simulation began with Jake providing overwatch for a team moving through hostile territory. Multiple threats, limited visibility, and the constant pressure of knowing that his teammates' lives depended on his accuracy, all the elements that had been present during the incident that claimed Rodriguez's life. For 45 minutes, Jake performed flawlessly. His shooting was precise, his decision-making was sound, and his communication with the team was clear and professional. But Sarah could see the emotional toll the scenario was taking on him. This wasn't just about technical skill, this was about confronting his deepest fears and proving to himself that he could handle them. Near the end of the exercise, the controllers introduced the final challenge, a scenario that exactly mirrored the situation in which Rodriguez had been killed. A surprise enemy position, multiple targets appearing simultaneously, and the need to make split-second decisions about priority engagement. Sarah held her breath as Jake assessed the situation. Through her spotting scope, she could see him identifying targets, calculating risks, and making the tactical decisions that would determine the outcome of the exercise. When he fired, his shots were perfect. Every target was neutralized in the correct priority order, and the simulated mission was completed successfully. But, more importantly, Jake had faced his worst nightmare and emerged victorious. As the exercise concluded, Jake remained in position for several minutes, processing what had just happened. When he finally stood up and walked back to the group, there were tears in his eyes, not of sadness, but of relief and closure. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked him quietly. "I feel like I just said goodbye to Rodriguez properly for the first time," Jake replied. "I feel like I honored his memory by doing the job he trained me to do." Chief Chen approached them with obvious satisfaction. "Morrison, that was exceptional work. I'm recommending you for advanced instructor training when we return from deployment. You've not only recovered your skills, but you've developed the kind of wisdom and leadership that can help other soldiers facing similar challenges." The formal conclusion of training was marked by a brief ceremony in which each team member received their evaluation scores and recommendations. Jake's scores were outstanding, but Sarah was most proud of the personal growth she had witnessed. As the team prepared to leave for their pre-deployment leave, each member thanked Sarah for her support during their training. When Jake's turn came, he struggled to find words adequate for what he wanted to express. "Thank you seems completely inadequate," he said finally. "You gave me back more than my shooting skills, you gave me back my faith in myself and my future." "You did all the hard work," Sarah replied, echoing the words she had used many times over the past month. "I just provided the space for you to do it. It was more than that, and we both know it. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and you refused to give up on me even when I had given up on myself." As the team loaded into their vehicles to leave, Jake lingered for a final private moment with Sarah. "I'll pick you up at 7 tomorrow night," he said. "Is that still good for you?" "Perfect," Sarah replied, feeling her heart race with anticipation. Sarah, Jake said seriously, I want you to know that whatever happens between us, working with you has changed my life. You helped me become not just the soldier I was before, but a better version of myself. You helped me too, Sarah admitted. Working with you reminded me why I chose this job in the first place. You reminded me that what we do here matters in ways I sometimes forget. As Jake's vehicle disappeared down the road leading away from the base, Sarah stood alone on the firing range where their story had begun. In 24 hours, she would see him again, but not as instructor and student. They would meet as two people who had found something unexpected and precious in the midst of trauma and healing. That evening, Sarah called her best friend to talk through her emotions about the developing relationship. As she described Jake's journey from broken warrior to confident leader, she realized that her own transformation had been just as significant. Working with Jake had rekindled her passion for her job and reminded her of the profound impact that compassion and understanding could have on a person's life. The next evening, as Sarah prepared for her dinner with Jake, she put on the target pendant he had given her. Looking at herself in the mirror, she reflected on how much had changed since that morning a month ago when she had been simply adjusting range targets and had no idea that her life was about to be transformed. When Jake arrived to pick her up, he was dressed in civilian clothes for the first time since she had met him. Without the military uniform, he looked younger and more relaxed, but no less impressive. The confidence and strength that had returned to him during their training was evident in everything from his posture to his smile. You look beautiful, he said, offering her his arm as they walked to his car. You clean up pretty well yourself, Sarah replied, marveling at how natural it felt to be with him in this new context. Over dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the ocean, they talked about everything except military training. Jake shared stories about his childhood, his family, and his dreams for the future. Sarah told him about her brother, her reasons for choosing her career, and her own hopes and fears. Can I ask you something? Jake said as they walked along the beach after dinner. What do you see for yourself in the future? What do you want your life to look like 5 years from now? Sarah considered the question carefully. A month ago, she would have given a straightforward answer about career advancement and professional goals. But meeting Jake had opened up possibilities she hadn't considered before. I want to continue doing work that matters, she said finally. I want to help soldiers heal and grow stronger. But I also want to share my life with someone who understands the importance of that work and who brings out the best in me. Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. I deploy again in 2 weeks. It could be 6 months before I'm back. I know that's not fair to ask someone to wait for, especially someone I've only just started dating. Jake, Sarah interrupted softly, what happened between us over the past month wasn't just professional development or casual attraction. We helped each other become better versions of ourselves. That doesn't disappear because of deployment schedules. So you'll wait for me, he asked, hope evident in his voice. I'll wait for you, Sarah confirmed. And, while you're gone, I'll be here doing the work we both believe in. When you come back, we'll see where this goes. As they kissed for the first time on the beach under a sky full of stars, Sarah reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them together. She had been simply adjusting range targets when Jake Morrison had walked into her life. Now, months later, she was embarking on an adventure that felt more significant than anything she had ever experienced. 6 months later, when Jake returned from deployment, he found Sarah waiting for him at the same firing range where they had met. She was adjusting targets, as always, but when she saw him approaching, her face lit up with the same warmth and joy that had sustained them both through the long separation. This time, when Jake picked up his rifle, his hands were steady not just because he had overcome his trauma, but because he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would never have to face them alone. As for Sarah, she had discovered that sometimes the most important work you can do is simply creating space for someone to heal and grow. And, sometimes, in the process of helping someone else find their way, you discover your own path to happiness. The firing range continued to be a place of training and preparation, but, for Sarah and Jake, it had become something more, a symbol of resilience, healing, and the unexpected ways that love can grow in the most unlikely circumstances. Years later, when they told their children the story of how they met, they would always emphasize that their love story began not with romance, but with compassion, courage, and the understanding that true strength comes not from never falling down, but from getting back up and helping others do the same.